It's the 10th of October, 2013, and we haven't talked in a while, Yaroslav.
Yeah.
And I thought we'd just chat about I want to chat about a topic that I've been dealing with a lot lately, and that's with an organization that is wanting to go paperless. And they're wanting to go paperless to better protect their files, and to better protect their files in the sense that they're kept off site, they're backed up, and they don't have the risk of paper. And then it ties more into how they do their workflow and to better be able to retrieve documents and check what's going on. And so I thought I'd take the business side of things, and perhaps you could take a SharePoint side of things, and we could just chat through what's been happening. The first thing I wanted to talk about was a lot of organizations, when they initially think of going paperless, they say to themselves, well, we'll just scan everything that comes in the door. Let's just put a scanner in the photocopy room, and you're done. Scan, done. And I'd warn organizations against that. My own feeling is, just because you're collecting that piece of paper doesn't mean you should be collecting that piece of paper. And a lot of people end up collecting stuff that's a complete waste of time. And it ends up taking up cycles of people to collect that information and store it and file it, and it's just a mess. And so from a business perspective, if an organization wanted to go paperless, the first thing I would say to themselves is, do an exercise of going through all your documents and deciding, what do you really need to keep?
I totally agree. Because think of it like, I know because working for a lot of companies, we think more in terms of large businesses standpoint, but putting on a personal perspective, if you're, let's say, if you're not even, a consultant, would you go paperless as a person? And if you would you go paperless on everything? You're not going to scan your grocery store receipts.
No.
You may keep, like, I don't know, your shoes receipts for maybe 3 months. Or I don't know, some electronics, maybe if you bought a laptop, you're going to keep it maybe for 2 years, It
really becomes a good cleaning house exercise, because when you go through all those documents, you end up realizing, why the heck was I keeping the grocery bill? And every year I just throw it out at the end when I went through stuff at tax time. It's ridiculous.
Exactly. So there's different types of, even as an individual, you already have so many different things. Like, nowadays all of our credit companies and banking companies are asking for electronic bills, So they push this. They charge us like $2, or something.
Unless you go electronic. Yeah, exactly.
So even as an individual, you already see such a big variance in terms of what you keep and what you keep electronic. A bunch of companies make you keep electronic things, or people don't even need them. So some of the things especially if you're expensing, if you have your own company, even if it's a one-man company, you still keep things. Some things are going to go there for 7 years, some things are less, depending on the amount, potentially, or significance of penalty. Let's say if you don't have that receipt or that piece of paper, the penalty is there, but it's a small penalty. You may want to keep it only for 6 months or a year, and then just take a risk. So the same thing as an individual, the company would go.
And something a lot of companies should keep in mind, and they may not have even thought about this, is that perhaps they're keeping information that they don't want to be responsible for anyways. So, for example, if I hold personal information on you, if I have a company policy that says I'm going to destroy that personal information in 1 month, then I don't have to have the burden of hanging on to it and maintaining it for, let's say, freedom of information requests.
Exactly.
And so it's to the benefit not to. So that was the first thing. And And the next thing I wanted to talk to you about is okay, how do you go about determining all the documents an organization has? And then I wanted you to take it from a SharePoint perspective. And what I did myself was I ended up going through each individual in the organization. I got printouts of their C drive. So I understood the folder structure and the files that were there.
Right.
And then I ended up looking at the pooled network drive to take a look at the files and the folders that were there. And then from those files and folders, I grouped them by department so it was easier for myself to digest, a department at a time. And after that, I grouped it by department. After that, I started categorizing the documents. So, were they an invoice? Was it a financial statement? Was it some sort of form that the organization has? Some sort of spreadsheet? And I went through and categorized all those documents, not by whether it was an Excel document or a PowerPoint document or a Word document or even a page as a keynote and a numbers document. I mean, I looked at it from what was the document. It's an invoice. It was that. And so what would you recommend someone do? Like, did I go about that in the best way that you've normally done it? By going through everybody's C drives and shared drives and going through all the documents?
Well, it depends on the organization, right? Some organizations, have completely folders of papers, right? Stack of papers. And then, and some organizations know exactly what they would like to. They're a little bit further in their maturity level what they want to automate or go paperless. Some organizations have no idea, so they want an audit, like you did an audit, right?
Right.
So it depends where organization is and what is their end goal.
Right.
I think the approach, right, of identifying metadata, whether you have to do it or the company has to do it, not metadata, identifying the type of content, as we're going to call it in technical terms, is exactly what needs to happen at some point, earlier or later.
So these things, so now then once I had a listing and I ended up putting everything in Excel to collect it all. I mean, it was just the simplest way for me. So by department, every single drive for every employee, and then the shared network pools that they had, what were the documents in those, and identified the type of document they were. Then the next step that I looked at was by each type of document that they had, what metadata did I want to capture around it? And now this goes more along into SharePoint now. And so in a non-technical terms, simply from the business perspective, on an invoice, we needed to capture the invoice date, who the invoice was with, an invoice number, and let's say that's all we wanted to collect on an invoice. There can be more. Every organization depends. And I looked at for each type of document within a department, what was the elements around that document I wanted to isolate, because I wanted to be able to, let's say, search on it once it's in our document repository, our document management system, which could be SharePoint, might not be SharePoint. In the case of you're a SharePoint expert yourself, what does the business need to know to be effective in giving that information to you as a SharePoint consultant? What's important to you? If I give you a list of documents and the metadata, what would you counsel me to do next?
Well, so going to the point of metadata, right? Like sometimes you may not, you may or you may not need to collect certain parts of metadata, right? Like take an invoice. The date is probably important. Who it came from is important. The amount, maybe. So it really depends what you want to do with that data.
Right.
Ideally, you would want to take everything, take an invoice as an unstructured piece of, different invoices look differently, right?
Yep.
As an unstructured piece of data and put it in a database where every single field is available
in
a unified format. That would be ideal, because that means that, 10 years from now, you can
everything's searched. Yeah.
All right. But do you really?
That's not realistic, and it's not. It's probably not the best use of resources for most organizations.
Exactly. So you have to really think about, what do you want to do with it in the next 2 years with an invoice? Do you care about automating some process? Let's say you know that there's a problem that, I don't know, the AP department, account payable is, has trouble, following up on and paying them on time. Well, maybe you need some sort of reminder workflow.
Right.
So maybe the data is really, the data and then the vendor name is all you need, and then it's just attached as the invoice itself is attached as a blob, right?
Right.
So
there's things such as questions I guess a business would want to ask themselves are, what do you want to search on?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this? Yeah. And I guess that would come back to, what are their people processes around that documentation?
Yeah.
Because there's one thing to collect metadata to search on, but you can take it a step further, can't you, and say, what data do I need to capture around a document if I want to put some workflows to those documents? And with SharePoint, we can do workflows, can't we? So an example of a workflow might be an expense report,
right,
approval process, I guess.
Right.
So maybe you could tell me a little bit more about workflows in SharePoint?
Yeah. So I mean, the workflows in SharePoint haven't really changed since majorly, I'll say, since SharePoint 2007.
Okay.
But there's a number of other, workflow tools that allow you to build more complex workflows and also, process multiple types of data from different data sources.
Right.
So K2 is one, about K2.
Yeah.
Nintex is another vendor that's positioned really well in terms of workflow space.
So the way I understood whether an organization would need to use a third-party workflow tool, like a Nintex or a K2, is, does the workflow information need to be captured when it leaves the organization versus just keeping the workflow within the organization? And a K2 would be very good at managing workflow for a document. When, let's say, you wanted to route a document to a third party for approval and then it needs to get sent back.
Well, it's not necessarily that, right? Sometimes the workflow can be quite complex within an organization itself, and you still need a tool to run it. So, for example, there's potentially things that you need to do with a piece of item, like extract information from some other system and then tag it on the top of, let's say, you got an invoice, right, and there's a vendor name, and you need to connect to your CRM to verify whether that's an overdue account, and then maybe escalate that invoice or something. Different things like that out of the box, for instance, can be managed. So that's one thing, so a variety of little scenarios like that. It's much more than just converting. You're right. That's why we alluded to the whole workflow thing, right? Because it's much more than just going paperless. It means, let's just scan everything, right? Someone's lives are going to change, right?
Right.
Someone, instead of getting an envelope and then opening it and then going into one system or just filing it into some inbox, they're going to now have to scan or re-enter or enter something.
Yeah, I mean, the organization has to take into account that there are implications to scanning it.
Exactly.
You end up becoming responsible for it. You have to maintain it. You have to upkeep it. There's resources tied to that, and those resources are people, and they cost money. Are we capturing the right things? Do we want to answer those freedom of information requests that come to us 10 years from now? No. So let's put up a disclaimer that says we're not going to collect that information, and or we destroy that information after a certain period. You collect the search information, and then not only metadata for search, but metadata around what workflows do you want to do with those documents in their metadata. Okay.
And then some documents will be more workflow heavy than others, right?
Right.
And so what I would suggest, if the organization is kind of like very new to the whole paperless workflow process and stuff,
yep.
I would suggest pick kind of an experimental process or document that you can sort of prototype on and say, hey, see, this works. Your users are actually okay with doing that sort of thing. Because if you're gonna try to position, well, let's automate your whole account receivable department, right? There's probably gonna get a lot of pushback. But maybe start with expense forms, right?
Yeah.
See if because it's something that the whole organization is involved in. Something that's not really critical. It's critical, but it's not really critical, right?
Could you list off for me the names of some documents that you have done workflows for? Have you done?
Yeah, I mean, it ranges, right? Like there's it started from an expense form to a mortgage application, right? So and then some other organizations that, let's say, also deal with this heavy financial document with lots of supporting documentation, they would be less comfortable going and automating it, right? So it really depends on where organization stands. But one common scenario was that each organization was a bit kind of skeptical. How is it all gonna work with their users, and how is it all gonna work? Like you personally, would someone says, hey Ron, how about we sign you up with Office 365, and you scan all your bills and you put there, you would probably feel a bit uneasy at doing that, right?
Yeah.
Even if someone says, hey Ron, it's only gonna cost you $100, maybe that will sweeten the deal, but probably you're gonna be like, well, is it backed up? Well, what if you would probably start.
Well, and from a business perspective, and the type of analyst work I do, I mean, that's when you want to tell the client, listen, we need to document the people process and the technology process. Let's document those workflows, and then that's essentially the requirements. And the design is, I break out the crayons, balsamic in my case, and we document those. We document the technology and reference it directly into the workflows that are done. And from there, we go and do a build on the SharePoint and what have you. But part of the training is really understanding the change management as well, and how you roll that out to the client, and show them what the people process, and show them what the screen designs, so they don't freak out about something that seems unknown.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be as complicated as people might think it is, as long as the processes are documented, they're in digestible chunks, and we show you exactly how it's going to flow along when you do go paperless.
I think it's a definitely interesting topic for every organization. It definitely brings a lot of value. It's how you position it, and how you kind of compare it to and show them that it's actually not as hard, and there's easy digestible steps you can take it with.
And it really is interesting times for this right now, because I think we're in that point of time right now, 2013, when going paperless is an achievable reality for mid-sized organizations and departments within larger organizations. It is something that is achievable, and the efficiencies that can be gained, and the review of existing processes and documenting those and tweaking it and making it paperless and using workflow to route stuff, I mean, you can really make improvements in an organization where they might have felt stagnant for a while in terms of getting more efficient, more leaner than their competition, and perhaps adding some sort of service or value add that they could tout to their clients and customers that their competitors don't do. You know, so I think it's interesting right now.
I think efficiency and you know, being lean is really one of the key things.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's all this behind the scenes. I mean, you don't make money out of pushing paperwork within an organization, right?
No.
You make money out of, you know, connecting with your customers, whatever your customers are. So if you can cut down on inefficient processes and miscommunication, the better it is.
Now there is a way to present it on the front end, not just for back end efficiencies, but you could state that to your customers, if you go with our organization over this organization that doesn't have a paperless efficient process with workflow, that will automatically send the mortgage document to you right away. You can sign it and get it back to us, and bam, we'll have your answer in an hour or so. So you can speed up the whole process. And it could be a differentiator.
Exactly. Or if you can, so that's an example. Or if you capture some information about your vendors and then present them in a smart sort of report, you can say, hey, we've noticed this particular trend. Do you want to submit your invoices earlier? That way you don't have to wait another billing cycle because you just missed it. Right. So like there's a variety of different things. Once the information is in there, people can work with it. If the information is not in there, then you can't work with it. So there's whole sorts of, and you don't have to like say to your customers, hey, we have actually I went to the walk-in clinic once and a while ago, and they're like, we've implemented, EMR, right, electronic
medical records.
Like, well, great. What does that mean to anyone, right? Who cares? Who cares? But what you could advertise, you could say, well, listen, now we have all of your information available right away, right? Or when the customer walks in, again, you could see, you don't ask them for, a medical card or insurance card anymore. It's there, So that sort of thing that you would advertise, not necessarily the fact that you've implemented the paperless workflow, but the whole idea that...
and it could be the differentiator between you and your competitor and why someone comes back to you.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely.
Hey, that's been great. Let's leave it there for today.
Yeah, I know. We can take whole day.
I know, because we're going to do this again. We keep saying that, and then there's long delays, but I get busy with client work. You're busy with client work, and in between all of that, life happens, and it's exhausting. So, hey, Yaroslav, where can people find you on the net?
Well, sharematch.com is my blog, and then there's a link to my Twitter and my books, so there you go.
Right, and you recently put out another book, didn't you?
Oh, that's been a while. It's been a few months already, but there's a link to my latest book on SharePoint 2013. What am I saying?
Oh, wow.
And so...
Okay, so sharematch.com.
Sharematch.com. And if you're in Vancouver, you can catch me at the SharePoint Summit, which is October 28th as well.
Oh, wow. Okay, so October 28th, SharePoint Summit, and you're going to be on the panel.
I'll be there.
Oh, wow. Very cool. And you can find me at rondegiusti.com. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.